Mr. Man, trip to the moon, trip to the moon, to the moon. Mr. Man and the trip to the moon. One day, Mr. Nonsense, my favourite, was reading the Nonsense Land Times when he had the idea of going to the moon. Well, if a cow can jump over it, then it can't be too hard to get to, he announced, to really no one in particular. The cow jumps over the moon. Moon pig. Later that day, he mentioned the idea to Mr. Greedy. Mr. Greedy thought it was an excellent plan. I hear the moon's made of cheese, he said, licking his lips. I like cheese. But Mr. Greedy did put Mr. Nonsense straight about one thing. It's a very long, long way away. Play away! So then he went to see Mr. Clever. What we need is a space rocket, exclaimed Mr. Clever. Explained Mr. Clever. A space rocket is something I've always wanted to build. Will that be very difficult? Asked Mr. Nonsense. Well, it is rocket science, so the answer's yes, said Mr. Clever, who rather likes to show off. I like to show off, did you know? While Mr. Clever built the rocket, the other two set about choosing fellow astronauts to travel with them. Mr. Nosy could not go because the space helmet would not fit over his nose. Mr. Tickle and Mr. Tall could not go because neither of them can fit into their space suits. You legs, you arms. I think just the three should go. And little Miss Splendid refused to take off her hat, which was just no good at all. Little hat. Little hat. Mr. Clever had finished the rocket in record time. Clever him. And the day of the launch arrived. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blast off! Cried Mr. Clever, pressing the launch button, but nothing happened. Nothing happened because Mr. Forgetful had forgotten to fill the fuel tank. Mr. Forgetful forgets everything, so why get him involved? An hour later, the rocket took off, soaring up into the sky, trailing a great cloud of smoke. It rose higher and higher into the air, higher and higher, high above the earth, through the atmosphere and into outer space. Oh my, cried Mr. Worry, I'm floating. Who invited him? And so he was. And so was everyone else. Well, you don't weigh very much in space, explained Mr. Clever cleverly. The air is much thinner up here. Unlike Mr. Greedy, chipped in Mr. Rude. Rudely. I like Mr. Rude. Any ideas why? Rude. It wasn't long before Mr. Greedy began to feel hungry, so he cooked paschetti for everyone. Perhaps not the most sensible idea. Noodle, did you eat my noodle? When they arrived, Mr. Nonsense was the first to walk on the moon because it had been his idea, although he kept an eye out for jumping cows. He hasn't got eyes, stop lying. Wow. It was Mr. Worry who discovered strange footprints on the surface of the moon, which he followed. While worrying, he was about to bump into a space alien. He was rather relieved to find it was little Miss Scary, walking on her hands. You scared me. Mr. Small could not believe it. Where did he come from? He could lift Mr. Greedy above his head with one finger. Oh, look at that. That's nice. Everyone had a wonderful day on the moon. Everyone except Mr. Greedy, who was disappointed to discover that the moon is not made of cheese. "I told you so," said Mr. Clever, something Mr. Clever never tires of saying. What is this? Cheese crackers. Not on your Nelly. The next day they packed up and went home. It had been a splendid adventure and Mr. Nonsense was very pleased with himself, and so were all who lived in Nonsense Land. All except one. Go to the moon? What nonsense! Said the cow. What? Ah, hang on. If a cow can jump over it, it can't be too hard to get to. A lie. Just ask the cow. Okay? Bye, men.